Welcome, divas and dudes. So happy to have you here at Powerhouse Bakery. We are doing meal prep in minutes. I'm going to give us a quick little summary in case you weren't with us on our last meeting, so you can kind of see what we're working with today and where we want to go with meal prep in minutes. So I popped up the Sofrito recipe, so in case you didn't have it, and remember there's lots of ways to implement Sofrito. It's a base that has so many ways to add interest and intrigue. Starting with Roma tomatoes, what I do here is boil them. So start off with about 12, boil them for as little as 6 minutes and chop them up, or as much as maybe even 15 minutes and get them really soft. I do like to season the water, so adding bay leaves is fabulous. You could even add a variety of other flavors. You could add a little bit of salt, you could add other seeds. So if you know you don't like to have too much of the texture of seeds in your actual sofrito, go ahead and put them in the water when you're cooking your tomatoes. If you love rosemary, absolutely put in a couple of big sprigs of rosemary into that water. Personally, I don't like to eat rosemary, but it does have lots of fabulous oils that will definitely infuse the tomatoes. And so there's lots of options there. Bell peppers of all colors, onion, garlic, and here we are with some other spices. So coriander, you could do fresh seeds or ground. You could do fennel, of course, fresh herbs as well. You could even go outside the norm and go with a little bit of dill. You know, sofrito comes from lots of different areas of the world. The Mediterranean, depending on what part of the Mediterranean, you will see some of the different seeds. So dill is a little bit more common in the Greece area. Northern Italy will be more of the parsley and maybe even some lemon, and you know, of course, the rosemary is as well in that Italian region. Don't forget the salt. We had a great conversation about salt and wondering if there's a certain salt that's better. We talked about Himalayan salt being one that does impart some fun and intrigue, and it's really nice to apply because it oftentimes will come in granules. Salt is still going to be salt. Gone are the days where we say that if you have high blood pressure, you can't add salt. Or if you're trying to eat a healthy diet, you can't add salt. What we do say is by cutting out processed foods, you are actually cutting out the worst components of salt because of the processing and the other foods that go along with the salt. So as home cooks working with base ingredients, I don't want you to be afraid of the salt shaker. I want you to be able to use wonderful salt. Is it okay if I erase? Okay. I want you to be able to use spices, and I want it to be something that is really customized to your palate so that you have fun with it. If you've been to any of my classes, you know I'm not as inclined to give you exact recipes because then it's mine and not yours. Feel free to start with, you know, one of my recipes. Speaking of which, if you haven't already downloaded the app My Fun Foods off of the just the app store, remember last year I wrote a cookbook and I donated it to ThriveWell, and so now those recipes have been added to this awesome little app, and so all the recipes in that cookbook are now available in a little app, which is so exciting. A young girl who is the daughter of one of the board of directors from ThriveWell created this app, and so it's just been so neat to be able to guide. Make sure you download that app when you want specific recipes, and then still be free to vary it and adjust it on your own. So when we have the sofrito, my pen is not working. I might have to, Mary, could you help me find a pen that's functional? Sorry, I didn't even test it out. Whew. When you want to set up your week, we want to talk about the importance of base foods. And so I talked about greens on here because it was a wonderful conversation, and then I'm going to erase this. But when we're talking about base foods, we want some greens. We want to get daring and have some really excellent dark leafies. There should be some sharp, yeah, the expos are hidden back there. Who brought up collards. Was it you, Maria?
Yes.
Yes. You were sitting over there last week. And I love the fact that we brought this up. So when we're shopping for our base foods, we want to make sure that you've got a couple of beautiful leafies. Thank you, ma'am. And we also, not that one? You're so good. No and yes. So base foods are important. We want to get some leafies. And remember, we also talked about going to the center of the store. What do we find in the center of the store?
Canned beans.
Yes. So not only do we want to get lots of color in the produce section, we also want to get to the center of the store, and we want to get the dried legumes. You know that term that everybody kind of says, what in the heck's a legume? Legumes are the things that come in those bags. Peas, so split peas, lentils, of all colors, lentils. And now you can even buy kind of a top shelf lentil, which would be an organic lentil. And I think it's worth it. When you think of, yeah, it's twice the price, but we're still under $3, right? And so it's an easy win to go from good to great when you're looking at base foods to maybe sometimes get organics. We also talked about canned items. So canned beans. What did we mention about that? Canned beans are okay. Canned beans are fine. We want to avoid ones that have what in there? Yeah. Avoid ones with extra sugars. That's it. If we avoid items with extra sugars, we can't go wrong, because whether you get a bag of lentils or a bag of beans, we still need to add salt. We still need to add spices. And what's nice is whether it's a bean or a bag, we still want to really dress them up. So I don't want us to be afraid of those complex carbohydrates that are in the center of the store. I want us to really use them as a base. And when we started putting together our grocery list and we're looking at our base and we're thinking, what are we going to get in produce and what are we going to get in the center of the store? What's the next kind of area we want to think of? Well, the proteins. And we mentioned that beef is fine, even though, you know, I try to talk up plant-based foods so much. I don't want us to be afraid of using good quality proteins. We just use them less often, and we probably use less volume. And so in today's meal prep, while I won't necessarily be adding meat to it, we will later in our meal prep in minutes series, because I want you to see how it works. So really the focus of today is to see how we can use a base ingredient like a sofrito in different applications, and knowing that we've got lots of things we can do outside these few ideas, because what we really want is to have a well-balanced menu plan that's so versatile during the week. Okay? So proteins, we talked about ground meats are great, because they are easy to serve with a variety of ingredients, but nothing wrong with muscle meats too. What do I mean by that? The actual flesh, so a chicken breast or a flank steak or a pork tenderloin, those are all excellent. And again, we can always think of how we go from good to great, because when we are picking out our ingredients on our best foods list, whether we're picking a type of salt like Himalayan or iodized salt, we're going to pick one that matches kind of where we are. You know, we talked about iodized. Is that important? Some people feel that that's a bad element to add to our salt, and I kind of disagree. I think it's valuable to add that in. So especially for people that live inland, that aren't near the coast, where we have less access to fresh fish, and of course the soil changes the more you go inland. Now granted, our world farm economy is really based on soil augmentation wherever you are, so there probably is some iodine in just about any soil, but I think the idea is still a good one, that getting a little bit of extra iodine in our salt is not going to hurt us. But it doesn't mean you couldn't also use other kinds of salt. We talked about kosher salt, of course, and I just mentioned earlier the Himalayan sea salt. So think about ways that you could get a good variety. I'm going to show you real quick my salt shaker. And I have two here. Turn my water down just a little bit. This is actually my pepper shaker, but I have one just like this of salt also. And so adding a variety in your salt shaker, just like you do for pepper, is a really nice way to go. And now you get a little mix and match of flavor and color from those different salts. If you've never seen the black salts, that's kind of fun and interesting. But I also love to be able to sprinkle it. And so again, going from good to great, lots of choices. And when we look at spices, we also might want to look at organics and thinking of ways to really get the very best ingredients. Looking at getting single spices that are really fresh is going to be a way that we go from good to great. So then our base foods are so versatile and so full of flavor that it makes it fun and easy. Did anybody go home after last week and look at their spice cabinet and see ones that maybe I haven't used in a year or so and I can get rid of? Maybe. And so when you're replacing those, get a small amount of the whole spice when you can. So instead of getting ground coriander, get the coriander seeds. Instead of getting pepper, get whole pepper kernels. Mix and match in your wonderful shaker or grinder. Think about other spices like fennel. Get the whole seeds. And then if you don't want the seed, you can grind it either in a coffee grinder or again, getting another mill, adding it to your salt. So now you got a little fennel in your salt or a little bit of dill seeds, and it's just fabulous. I mean, who doesn't love a salad with a little interest and intrigue with each bite? And so adding those seeds to your salt is a great way to go. And then again, just to circle back with the protein idea, going from good to great, if you're looking for the right application, sometimes getting organic might be worth it. Free range or grass-fed, but be real careful because sometimes that does not appreciably change the nutrition quality, and it might not be where you want to spend your dollar. So think through it. There could certainly be applications where it makes sense. Remember that when it's grass-fed beef, the fat content will go up. And so, you know, if you want a little richer dish, that might be acceptable. If you're getting free range chickens, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have a better diet. Chickens do naturally live free range, of course. And they eat all kinds of things. So a vegetarian fed chicken doesn't mean it's healthier. Same with their eggs. Now, if they're fed a diet that's giving them lots of extra omegas and lots of extra nourishment, that might be worth the money. And so picking a chicken farm that feeds their chickens a very specific diet might be appropriate for you, especially if you have high cholesterol and you're trying to improve the fat profile in your diet. Bottom line is, being informed when we build our base will really help you in making sure that when it's a Tuesday afternoon and you're opening your refrigerator trying to decide what's for dinner, you've got nothing but great things to pick from. And that makes it fun and simple rather than trying to dig around and find a recipe and starting from scratch on a Tuesday afternoon when you don't feel like it. Okay, so that's the base. And so now, as I kind of walk you through our cooking ideas for the day, I went with our base foods, and then I tried to show you some ways to add interest and intrigue to the sofrito. So if we think of sofrito being a tomato base, what would be some ways that we could make a meal out of a sofrito? At Powerhouse Bakery, one of them is the real deal. I put that in quotes because, you know, so often when you go to a healthy food, you think, oh, I got to give up the stuff I really like. Well, this is the real deal. This is spaghetti and meat sauce. And so it would have ground meat or not. It would have this wonderful tomato, so a very nice homemade sauce with lots of flavors over some pasta. And so I chose lentil pasta, so that in this particular application, it can be meatless, because this is going to give us our protein. Lentil pasta is nice and high in protein. I'm going to get the box and I'll read you the nutrition facts. I'll turn this down even more so I don't boil away my water. So when we think about how much protein should be in a meal, anybody want to venture a guess? 20 grams, maybe? Okay. If we had 20 grams in a meal and we said that, gosh, now that we're learning a little bit more about how much protein we women need, when we're thinking somewhere around maybe 50 to 70 grams for the day, yeah, 20 sounds pretty good for a meal. This container of lentil pasta gives us 4.5 servings. So if you have a family of 4, you'll have a little bundle left over. Or maybe even more, because we might not want a full serving. But let's just go with 1 serving if this gives us 4.5. 1 serving is 180 calories, and it gives us 13 grams of fat. So I'm sorry, not fat, protein. So protein, actually, let's do this. I'll give you the whole breakdown so we can see. So nutrition. So 180 calories. Again, this is like 1/5 of the box, and it gives us 13 grams of protein and 1.5 grams of fat. Does that seem low? It should. 34 grams of carbs and fiber. 5 grams of fiber. How many grams of fiber do we need in a day? Anybody want to guess? Best guess?
Say about 30.
Yeah, between 30 and 50. And again, I wouldn't want you to check your records so carefully and feel like, okay, now I better add in a fiber supplement. That's not worth it. I don't want you to go get a fiber supplement to get to 30 or 40 grams of fiber a day. Just like I wouldn't really want you to get a protein supplement if you weren't getting 50 to 70 grams of protein. I don't think it's worth it to go get a supplement because we are doing a transition of whole foods, because what we're understanding is that sometimes we can have an ebb and flow, meaning some days you'll be lower, some days you'll be higher. That's good. We don't need to supplement every day to keep it at that minimum or, the maximum. And also, when we start looking at all the phytonutrients in plants and muscle meats, we realize that there's so many other nutrients that we are not counting, that we're not really acknowledging in our overall wellness. We don't need to put all our eggs in the basket of the nutrition label facts. You follow me? So if we were going to base our health diet or our healthiest food choices just on what the USDA says, which is fats, saturated fat, cholesterol, sodium, that's a drop in the bucket. There's so many other ways that we evaluate health. We've talked about phytonutrients and, of course, phytoestrogens and all the antioxidants. So all those go into the evaluation of our diet, not just these big terms. And so same with carbs. How many carbs do you think we need in a day? Hard to know, right? Somewhere around maybe 130 to 150 grams of carbs. And again, it'll depend on calories that you burn. It depends on your age and your genetics. But this kind of gives you an idea of what does this label really tell me about the nutritional quality of this dish. And so the good news is it's got protein, it's got some fiber, it's got some carbs, and we haven't even talked about all the goodies that are going into our vegetable sauce. And so that's the part that is really the frosting on the cake. And you mean the container? It's 8.8 ounces. Yeah. And a serving dry is 2 ounces. Don't try to measure it. Don't, yeah, right. But I think that when we're looking at plant-based protein, lentils are certainly going to be higher in protein than a brown rice pasta. But now I'm going to tell you something. In my house, I prefer brown rice pasta because this is kind of heavy for me. I would rather eat my lentils as lentils, and I'd rather eat brown rice as pasta. because I don't like the gluten in wheat, and so I've just gone to the brown rice pasta. That doesn't mean that's right for everybody, and I really want you to explore and find one you like, but I feel this is a little too heavy for me. It just kind of doesn't sit well. So when we're looking at the real deal, we want to think of how we're going to build it. We've got our great base that's loaded with antioxidants, and so we just call it a powerhouse ingredient. And we want to pair it with what we went shopping for in the center of the aisle, which is that lentil pasta. And just this particular time, we're going to go meatless. If we wanted to add the meat, we could add ground turkey if we wanted. Or like I mentioned last week, we could add ground beef. Certainly workable. Would that change the numbers here? Sure. It would probably give this another maybe 7 grams of protein, maybe 5 to 10 grams of fat. Carbs wouldn't change. Fiber wouldn't change, right, by adding meat. Micronutrients would change. So here's a good one. If we were going to add beef, what micronutrients do you think it would add? Higher in iron. So, red meat gives our body a great source of iron. Ground turkey, a little bit, not so much though. So the darker the meat, the more myoglobin and more iron. And so that's a great one. So if you're wanting to make sure that you're getting enough iron, having red meat once or twice a month would be fine. Where else could we get high iron? Spinach. Yeah, spinach, nuts and seeds, which is why I always add in the mighty seeds every chance I get, because we know for sure that gives us a great source. So now we've got our pasta and we've got our sofrito. Would we want to add anything else to the dish or to the meal? Maybe one extra veggie. I'm going to show you today how to do asparagus. Because, in old days, before we were enlightened, we might have had just a big plate of pasta. And now we're learning that even though this portion tells me and I can spread that out on my plate and make it feel really big, it might be more than I need. So to decrease the total volume of calories and still feel like I've got a beautiful plate, I could add another veggie, which is some. Yes.
Are they talking about in that serving dry pasta or if it's cooked?
Dry. Yeah, it says it on here. Yeah, I mean, and right, it will. And in a minute, I'm going to pop it in the water here so you can see it cooking. But, there's even gadgets. Who's a gadget gal or guy? Yeah? You can buy a little ring and it measures out your exact amount of pasta. You have a scale? Wow! That's awesome. There's a little bit of brokens in there. But I'll just show you. It's about the size of your pinky. So if you didn't have a gadget and you really wanted to know, it's about the size of your pinky. So, yeah, who's pinky, right? But it'll give you a good idea. And so my water is boiling and it's slightly salted. And I'm going to go ahead and break this in. And that way it's going to take about 9 minutes. So I'll let it get started. So as we're creating our meal, we want to have the real deal, meatless or not, and probably add another veggie. So we could easily add a green salad. And so be always thinking, just because you have all your veggies in your sauce doesn't mean we want to give up the chance to add more color, texture, even temperature variation on the plate. So now it becomes a wonderful option. And then leftovers, we're going to reinvent the sofrito. I've got the leftover asparagus, some eggplant, and some potatoes. I'm going to make a 1-bowl meal that's fabulous as a cold dish. So let's get started on the cooking. Now I put my lentil pasta in, and I've got my water boiling, and again, it's salted. It's a good idea to stir this on occasion because those noodles do tend to want to stick. And I think the package even tells you 7 to 9 minutes, but I normally do it less. I like to keep it a little firm, and that way we can make sure that it doesn't get mushy as it's sitting in there. I'm going to go ahead and add the rest of those in. So while those are cooking, I'm going to prep a couple things. One of the other things that we bought on our shopping trip was some spaghetti squash. So has anybody worked with spaghetti squash? Yes, I hope so. If you've been to at least one of my classes, I'm sure I've talked about that plenty. Let me close this down. So with spaghetti squash, the trick really is how to get it cooked and be able to cut through the really tough rind, right? To get it, usually recipes will tell you to cut it in half, cut side down in a baking dish of sorts, and it's very difficult to cut. So several years ago, I figured that if I just threw the whole thing into the oven, it worked beautifully, already soft when I pull it out, and it's so much easier to prepare. And so what I've done here is I cooked it last night, and I want you to see, now my oven at home does have a convection, so you can see it got dark and kind of hard on the outside, kind of crispy. That's just because of the way my oven is. When we cook them here, I don't get this browning, but I do touch it, and it should be still semi-firm, but it definitely yields to pressure. And I'm telling you this because some ovens vary a lot. I had it at 350. It took about 35 minutes at home, and I pull it out with oven mitts, leave it on the counter for about 10 minutes until it's cool enough to manage, and then I cut off both ends. So both ends of the stem so that it's much easier to work with. And then I cut it down the center and open it. Now, if I got to this stage and I thought, oh shoot, it needs to cook more, then I could certainly put it in the oven, cut side down with a little water and let it cook some more. But I actually thought it was just fine. And truly, spaghetti squash is so forgiving. You can have it a little al dente, a little bit crunchy, or you could have it softer. But just be careful because you get al dente, just perfect, pretty soft, and then yucky, right? So another way you can let it go a little longer, because you never want to get it over here. So you pull it out, you realize, oh, it's a little firm. You can even just put it back together and let it sit and let it steam itself. Even just put it back. So there's ways to kind of keep the cooking going very gently if you need to. So what I'm going to show you now is how to take those seeds out. So I'm going to cut on each end, and I'm going to do a little oval circle right around. You see if it's got that silk in there, and so I just want to cut all those little silk threads without losing a lot of the actual spaghetti squash. And now I'm just going to make little cuts all the way through it. And with my knife, I'm just gradually getting those silks right into the center. Has anybody found a fun gadget that works this?
Yeah.
Yeah?
It's a spoon that you use for grapefruit.
Ah, yeah.
It's got that little edge.
Little edge.
So
Cool.
that works.
Cool. Well, and you know, I hate to waste, and so I'm always watching my team. Make sure you don't get too much of the spaghetti squash, you know, because we want to just get this little bundle out. So as I cut around, I'm getting all of those silk threads, and look how 99% of it comes out with the first try, and I haven't wasted any. So I love that. And so you can see how pretty that is. I'm going to check my lentil pasta here and make sure it's going good. I don't have any pieces sticking together, because you know what we're going to get to sample. We're going to get to sample this and this together. So that's going to be lovely. And then we're going to also sample our sofrito with our spaghetti squash. And then I'm also going to show you how to make that beautiful asparagus. So yeah, that's looking beautiful. Okay, so now, Mary Jonas, can I bother you for a fork? A metal fork. Metal, yeah, because I'm going to pull this out. Thank you.
Did you roast anything else besides the squash in the oven?
Yes. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. In fact, I should have sent you a picture. I'll send you guys a picture through Jose in my oven, because I had all of our fixins. So never would I turn on my oven and have just one thing in there. It just bugs the heck out of me that I'm wasting space. And so before I go any further, let me show you.
I usually prep a whole cauliflower and some root vegetables when I'm roasting vegetables.
I love it. That's what you do. I love that, Seema. You're absolutely right. And really what I think is so smart is to not worry so much about the temperature. Because again, all ovens are a little bit squirrely. Let's see if I can, there we go. So I did some poblano peppers. I did some regular peppers, and I just put the whole things in whole. And then I did some very small potatoes, which I'm going to use in our next dish. Now, if I'd gotten the large potatoes, yeah, they would have taken longer. But these are perfect. They're still a little bit firm, so if I decided to do a skillet stir fry, I could. And they've just cooked beautifully. I also did some sweet potato, and I cut them in half, cut side down, and they all went into the oven at the same time. So great, great point. Yes. Not a thing. You know, if you poke it, now you got drips coming into your oven. Well, I can't say it's ever happened. I won't say it would never happen. Golly, has anybody had that problem? Yeah, that would be terrible if it was, if it did. So if you're nervous about it, do maybe 2 little holes at the top and, you know, a baking pan down below if you're worried about it leaking. I just have not had that happen. So you've probably, anybody not worked with a spaghetti squash before? I think you all have. Oh, good. Okay. So, you know, what's nice is I'm just going to pull all of those threads to the center, and I'm going to put it right into my beautiful serving pan. And it's just that simple. It's going to stay in my refrigerator for several days. And I mean, it comes out, and if you want, you could even put a little bit of olive oil on it to let it stay, you know, keeps it from getting dry. And sometimes I'll add a little bit of lemon juice so that it's just like fantastic, ready to go. And so I let this one stay a little bit firm. I honestly like it that way. But what's also nice is since it's a little on the firm side, I can warm it up and cook it again, and it won't get to that mushy stage, you know, where it's a little too far. Now, I would absolutely get every little bit out of there, but this is giving us a good idea. See how pretty that is? And so now let's dress it. So here is my beautiful sofrito. You can freeze this. It'll stay in your refrigerator as well for 7 to 10 days. So I love that. I'm going to turn down the heat on this one. And as soon as my skillet's a little cooler, I'm going to get rid of all of it and do our asparagus in there. And here is our lentils, noodles, and they're just about ready. I'm going to test one. So I can tell by the texture of it. It's just perfect. So I love that. So now I'm going to pull that out. And again, just really save this nicely in the fridge for several days. Just go ahead and add some olive oil and some salt, and it will stay really nice. And I'm going to keep my water hot because if I was doing my meal prep, I'd put my quinoa right in there and cook it away, or my brown rice. No sense in dumping it out. I can just, because it's got a little bit of nuttiness flavor in there from the lentil pasta, and it's just fantastic. So another thing we can do is when my noodles are dressed, I could add olive oil, I could add walnut oil, and I could also add some of the sofrito. So let me add a little bit of this now, and then we're going to move into our saute. So I'm just going to turn it all the way off. All right. Oops. It's really heavy. So here would be a great time too if I wanted to add a little bit of cheese. I don't typically add cheese to my dishes, but I have it on the table so people could add it in as they want. One thing I do love to add is the mighty seeds. So in both of these dishes, I'm going to add a little bit of, again, that interest and intrigue with the seeds right on top. So I've got 2 here. I've got the chia, hemp hearts, and flax. And then this one, I've got my seedy blend. So this is going to be coriander, fennel, sea salt, some sunflower seeds, coriander, and dill. So I love that. I'm going to put that on both of them. So again, cheese is the traditional. Cheese can go on the table, but it's kind of fun to have something unexpected in the dish that you're serving. Golly, what kind of cheese? Porcino, I think it's called. Parmigiano Reggiano, yes, absolutely. So many great choices. And of course, I want to put my fresh herbs on. So even if this is all leftovers and I wanted to really brighten it up and freshen up the dish, adding some fresh herbs is the way to do it. So I would absolutely put this on. And I probably would not chop it. I'd probably leave sprigs. So with cilantro, you know how it grows, there's always the spans in between. So I'd love just to take the leaves off and not even use the stem. It can be strong, right? It can be strong.
Stems are great when you're sauteing onions to make gravies. They are awesome.
Yes.
So I never think of this kind of sauteing onions with garlic and whatever.
You can definitely keep them off to the side and put them in your veggie broth too, which is fabulous. It's just that in this really fresh state, personally, I don't like too much stem. But you know, to your point, Seema, a little bit is perfectly fine. But you know, if I had arugula, again, if I've shopped and I'm using up the fresh produce first of the week, my spinach or power greens, arugula, I would mix that right in there, and that would be another style of the dish. It turns out really nice when you put it in hot. It wilts the leaves just a little bit. If it's leftovers and cold, now it makes it more like a pasta salad. I love that variation because there's, you know, really different textures to play with. The other thing that I would do is cut my poblano peppers, and I can start stuffing some goodies right inside there. And this was really my plan for the second part of the dish, but even just serving that beautiful pasta with the pepper right next to it would be beautiful. So you get a little bite of the hot peppery along with the sofrito and all those different flavors. So I'm taking out the seeds here of my poblano pepper, and sometimes just serving them off to the side are really nice. And Maria, thank you so much for sharing this beautiful sauce. This would be fantastic to add to some focaccia bread or mix it in with our sofrito, right? You've used it before and it's pretty spicy, right?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, it was to a recipe that was had green beans in it and also ground turkey. And
I
they
love
recommended
it.
The Italian bamba sauce. By the way, it was at Trader Joe's. You have to call it first Tuesday of a cocktail.
Yeah.
It's called Italian bamba sauce.
Yeah, we'll pass it around so you can all see the label, because you know those little finds are so wonderful to have in your pantry so that you know you have your base foods and you want to dress them up a little. Having a trick sauce is so good. So I love it. So Italian bamba, and it does say it's fermented, I believe. Yeah, fermented crushed. So chili peppers, sunflower seed oil, extra virgin olive oil, basil, salt, ascorbic acid, and then other liquid, I guess it's another preservative, citric acid again, but nice, really nice. Okay, so now I'm going to get my heat back up, and I'm going to show you how to do the asparagus. I did a quick rinse, and now I'm going to break off the ends. So here's our beautiful sofrito. So when you do asparagus, how do you know what part is going to be tough? Yeah, you just kind of break it, let nature tell you where. If we just took a knife and cut them all at once, we'd probably be missing out. Some of them would give you more length. And the other day I was chatting with some customers, and they said, well, they never get the thick asparagus because it's always tougher. And that's actually not true. It's really a variety difference and how you cook it. So I'm gonna just do a quick little break. See, look at this guy. I probably wouldn't even use him. He didn't want to snap at all. He didn't want to snap, but this one I could tell is really good. So these are they should be crispy and beautiful. Mary, can I bother you for a second? Can you empty out my water? Thank you so much. So I'm going to use that again. Just dump it, yeah, and I'm going to use the pot. And before I forget, this is my beautiful eggplant. So I just, in the same oven, I chopped up some eggplant. I'm going to show it to you in a second. But I just wanted to have something else to add in to my beautiful saute. So I'm going to put this along the edge. And when I make your plates for you to sample, I want you to try this. So it's just chopped eggplant with a little salt and olive oil. I would not have tried this. I would have thought, oh, you got to dress it up. It's so good. It's just light, and it has an earthy, nutty flavor. Something similar, of course, could be the mushrooms, you know, if you wanted to add that in as another side. But I didn't want to forget that as we're trying our new vegetables. Okay, so I'm going to put my asparagus in. My skillet's heating, but I want to have it dry. Thank you so much.
Suzanne, did you roast your eggplant with all the other
I
vegetables?
did.
Okay.
Yes, I did. I cut it first. Again, just really lightly dressed it. I'm going to use that as a veggie now. I just think it's fabulous. And I probably would add seeds, and I would, you know, add some more interest and intrigue on them. But I had originally planned to do a caponata style, mixing it in with my sofrito, but I loved it so much separate that now I want to use that more. So again, yeah, questionable, right? But see how fat that one is? And I'm telling you, this is going to be so good. And I can tell because it's crispy already. Anybody believe that only the thin asparagus is the way to go? Yeah, some of us. Well, like I said, I'm surprised at how delicious. And of course, to Seema's point, we wouldn't throw these away, all these extras. We're going to make our veggie broth. And even at Powerhouse Bakery, as busy as we are, I love it when we make homemade veggie broth, because then we don't have to add a bunch of salt. We have all the flavor options at our disposal.
So I have asparagus growing in my yard, and
Woo!
each one of them is like this thick.
Yeah.
And you can just pick it up and
Eat it.
eat it.
I love it.
With just,
So
if you
cool.
want to cook it, the best would be in a salad with some lemon
Yeah.
rind and some olive oil.
Right?
It's really
Oh,
good. Yeah.
so nice and simple. Great, great point. Yeah, so now I'm going to add a little bit of olive oil, but I don't want to just yet. I'm going to get my skillet nice and hot. So if you have seen me do asparagus this way, the goal is hot, dry skillet to start. And I know I had a little bit of tomato in there, but not much. You know, I got most of it out. It's a nonstick skillet. And a little splash of water after I add in the olive oil. So it's heating up beautifully. And now what I'm going to do is prep my potatoes so I can have my extra little add-ins. And look at these beautiful cherry tomatoes. So again, another fresh add-in. If I'm going to serve one of these as a cold salad, you bet I'm going to put in fresh tomatoes. So that's going to be another one of my cuts. I've got my sea salt that I'm going to sprinkle in. And I thought, you know, I might want some pumpkin seeds somewhere. So this is our traditional blend that has some walnuts, pumpkin seeds, and dried cranberries. I don't know if I'd put it in that, but I sure like the idea of sprinkling a little bit on my asparagus once it's completed. So now I'm going to add my eggplant. Oops, slippery little bugger. I wanted you to see how I cut it for those pieces. So about, oh, I'd say an inch thick, about an inch thick, and then slice, turn, and slice. So my pieces are some a little bit bigger than others, but I like having the texture variation. So when the pieces that are certain sizes cut, some of them get a little bit crispy, some of them get a little bit soft. I just like the varied pieces. Okay, this is coming along fine. You smell it? It's starting to get a little toasty, which I love. I want a really hot skillet. Just a quick little drizzle. Now I'm just going to shake them around. just a tiny bit. The thing is, the thin asparagus are harder to cook because it's even less time in the skillet. This is only a few seconds. And I'm just gonna watch for the color to change. To see, I've got some little ones in there, and then I've got some fatter ones. But that's okay. We can pick and choose which ones we want that way. So maybe another 10 seconds, and I'm gonna add some water. So now I'm doing a dry saute, an oil saute, and then a light steam. So all those pieces of the cooking spectrum are giving me a really nice crispy outside on the asparagus. They're not gonna be mushy. I think I'm gonna add a little bit of my seeds. And heck, why don't I add a little bit of pumpkin seeds too, just because. And it's just about ready. I'm gonna add a slight bit of water. So what is that, about a tablespoon? And I use just about all of it. Look how pretty. Can you see them? They're just about done. I'm looking for the little bit of a sheen on the outside. Yeah, that looks gorgeous. All right, let me make a spot for them. Oh, wait till you try these. Oh, yummy. And see, I've got a little bit of juice in there. If I had some plain spaghetti squash, that would be so delicious. Let me just do that right now because I can't resist. It sounds so good. Because this is another dish, right? Turn this down. Those little drippings are just like gold. Yes. There we go. And I'll even put the rest of my eggplant in there. See, I didn't need sofrito at all. So if you have somebody that doesn't really love red sauce, I mean, oh, this looks so good. So again, I'll kind of go with the same flavors. Give us a little bit more volume. Gosh, maybe a 1/1000, maybe a teaspoon and a half. Not much. And really, Amy, it's just look at your skillet. You don't want it to be anything pooling. What was pooling was the juices from the asparagus, you know? And so I would love this. I got a little chunk right there, but it's okay. Spaghetti squash just kind of, you have to help it. I think that looks so exotic and yummy. So let's try this too. Right? It really does.
So I have a question. How long does your non-stick pan last? Yours look really clean.
Yes. Well, this is an induction one, and I just use it for you guys, so I don't have an answer to that. As much as it cost me, I hope it lasts a long time.
So that's the problem. You spend like $50 on a
Yes.
really nice one.
Yes.
And 2 weeks later,
I
it
know.
looks like
But I promise you, I wouldn't get a nonstick. I only got this one because I was learning induction. I would spend the $50 on a beautiful, shiny stainless steel. In a second, I'll show you ours from the kitchen. It's my favorite. It cleans beautifully, and when you're a good cook, it'll never stick.
Yeah.
So there is a new one that has like a stainless steel web on it. I don't remember the brand name. And it really works.
Yay!
It's very expensive.
There's lots of new materials out now. So the
But
old,
it's not a non-stick like the chemical stuff.
right. And I wouldn't even know that this one is per se. It looks like it, to your point. But I think the main idea is things stick when you start wrong. If you had a cold skillet and you put your oil in and then your stuff, that heating process makes a really good cement. So if you don't want your product to stick, you got to let it get really hot, and now the oil creates a surfactant and it's perfect. I mean, even pancakes on those beautiful stainless steel cookware will work. You know, in pancakes, you think, oh, you got to have a lot of, you know, surfactant on there, and you really don't. So it's great. So I kind of want to go over all the goodies, and then we're going to get to eat. So I made a lentil pasta here. You could add in cheese if you wanted. You could add in more variety of vegetables, potato, and of course my other cooked vegetables could be a side dish. Don't be afraid to mix potato with lentils, because remember, lentils is a protein. So if we wanted to have a little more complexity, a little more flavor, a potato is great in lentil pasta. And then in this one, I kind of did the trio. I've got the spaghetti squash with the sofrito. I've got the lentil pasta with the sofrito, and then on top I added the eggplant and maybe some strips of pepper. And then on our plate, we can add in our beautiful asparagus to the sides. Just make sure, look, they have so much body. They did not fall over in a slump. They're perky. Yes. And so having the extra veggie on the side is so wonderful to give you lots of complex carbohydrates, soluble fiber. For extra interest and intrigue, I've added a few nuts and dried cranberries, or you could use dried cherries. Always, always find a home for your mighty seeds. And so I sprinkled a little on there, but you can't even miss adding a little extra right on the top as you're serving. So often people say, what do you do with the mighty seeds? And I answer, what do you not do with the mighty seeds? And so get adventurous, and you'll realize it's kind of like adding your next salt and pepper. But it gives you nuttiness, it gives you a little bit of texture, and very fun.
Almost in lieu of cheese.
Yes!
You made that stuff.
In lieu of cheese. And that's why I didn't even bring the cheese out, because that's the expected. And how about if we just start with the unexpected, and then, you know, if we have some traditionalists, we can oblige them and have a little bit on the table. But this is a really fun way to introduce some new, interesting ideas and still have some familiarity. You know, the red sauce is easy to love. Again, with more adventure, we can certainly do the little scramble here that I did with the eggplant and the leftovers from the asparagus. I think that's going to be heavenly. So there you have it. Thank you so much for enjoying sofrito and all the fixins.